Do you ever find yourself thinking about the past? And it's not just that nostalgic or even romantic kind of a way, but in the, why does this still sit with me kind of way. And if you are someone who remembers everything, that can be a very heavy thing. Like a conversation, one that you had years ago that still echoes in your mind, that little peanut head, or a moment that you thought you forgot about, but instead it lingers. Some unfinished business, an unanswered question, or maybe even just a feeling that never fully dissipates. And that's the thing about the past, because it doesn't just leave. It finds its way back in those quiet moments, in the spaces between distractions, in the things that we still need to make sense of. It finds its way. And that's what we're talking about today. The past. How it stays with us, how it shapes us, and sometimes how it refuses to let us go. But before we go there, because that's what's on my brain, I want to take just a second to give a very heartfelt thank you to you. You, yes. Everyone who's part of the Mortals community. You guys, you're the reason that the podcast exists. You're the reason that the community exists. Because if you're not contributing, if you're not participating in this community, I wouldn't feel as confident, as comfortable, as excited, as hopeful to show up. And I'm grateful for you, because you could be doing anything, anywhere, and for you to be spending time with me, investing in me, I appreciate it. And if you're not in yet, just know this is not in any way just some fan club. It's not. It's a space that I know and that other mortals can say that's filled with incredible people, real conversations, people who think differently, who think deeply, who want to connect beyond bogus surface level. It's where we get into the real stuff, because when you clear out everything, when everything stops as far as the noise or the distractions, if you don't have community, what do you have? Join the Mortals right now. Use the code MORTALME for instant and free all access, first looks, first listens. Linking it right now in the description and show notes. You have no excuse at this point. And you, fellow funeral professional, I see you. I appreciate you. Keep showing up. Director OS is changing the way professionals serve, because if you're being real and I'm being real, what we as funeral professionals do matters, and how we show up matters. And maybe our glass feels half empty. Maybe you feel deflated, but hopeful and hope-filled. And if that's the case, if you want to level up, if you want to be exceptional, progressive, if you want to be one that pioneers this profession, because it will take pioneers, yes. The whole, we've always done it this way, if that's gross to you, if you're ready, invest in yourself. A course which took 18 months to create, 14 years almost of knowledge, proven methods. Director OS, my friends. Linking it right now in the description. All right, let's get into it. A show which pulls back the curtain and takes down the walls brick by brick and exposes the hearts of those caring for those you love most. I can say that so fast now. This is episode 224. There are 365 days in a year. And if you stacked 224 episodes of The Mortals up on top of each other, you would not reach the moon, but you would have a lot of content to listen to keep you entertained, maybe, while you travel to it. Hope you all had a great week. Yeah, it's Tuesday. We're doing a new thing. We're going to try a new thing. I don't know, because I said so. I just think that the Monday blues are a real thing. Sunday night, who wants to get the Sunday scaries? Do you all have that where you dread about 4 o'clock? It's kind of a thing in the United States specifically. If you're not in the U.S., I don't know that you have it. Maybe you do. But where 4 o'clock comes and it's almost like our bodies realizing there's this anxiety and angst that comes over us. Angst is not necessarily the word. Maybe you do feel angst. But anxiety, where, oh my gosh, I have work. That should not be how you feel. For work, anyway. But I absolutely am not diminishing your feelings if that's how you feel. I'm like the guy that apologizes. I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm sorry or not. But nonetheless, we're going to Tuesdays because Monday is the day back. It's like the transition from the weekend. So Monday is kind of, for many people, a day that is bleh. Who wants to think Monday? Who wants to have to do anything on Monday? Tuesday, you're back in the swing of things. So hopefully you're back in the swing of things right now. So we'll try it. If it doesn't work, we'll just pivot again. But I'm glad you're here because I just added yet another yes segment to the mortals because it's been anything and everything, this podcast, and I can do what I want. I'm a grown woman. Let's talk about some trending topics. We've got random facts. We got spooky story time. Let's talk trending time. All right? Great. AI holograms at funerals. The future to you, or just do you find it creepy? Imagine this. You go to this funeral, and instead of just hearing a eulogy from Brother Bob, who starts his eulogy with, well, I didn't know Peggy Sue, but that's so beautiful. You see the person who passed away, standing there, speaking to you, thanking you for coming. That's not, honestly, some sci-fi movie plot, although it is, because there's been quite a few movies about holograms. It's real. AI companies are now developing these holograms that allow people to, quote unquote, attend their own funerals through pre-recorded messages. Deepfake technology and voice replication. I mean, all of that already exists right now. It is going to happen. Now, on one hand, this could be a very comforting thing. You're able to see this loved one. You're able to hear their voice again, getting that last message. But on the other side, is this really them? Which, obviously, Nathan, that's not them. Of course it's not. But there's this very blurred line that's happening. It's starting to happen. Like the young boy who unfortunately took his life because of his falling in love with an AI character. Or is this just some version of that loved one that we created because we're, quote unquote, too scared to let go? I pivoted there, but would you want your last words to be played like that? Or do you think that saying goodbye should actually be goodbye? Not saying it, but the actual goodbye be you saying goodbye. You dying. Number 2, what about this? The tunnel beneath the asylum. Have you heard about the Forgotten Past uncovered thingamabob a few weeks ago? Construction workers in Pennsylvania. Yes. In Diana. Hi, fellow mortal friend. In Diana's neck of the woods, made a disturbing discovery. They were digging up land for this new development, and they found this underground tunnel asylum, one that led directly to what once was this psychiatric asylum in the early 1900s. You hear something like that, and of course, our mind immediately goes to, quote unquote, ghost stories. We love ghost stories, but you're not wrong. In addition to that, and beyond that, think about all the people who once lived in the place, forgotten, locked away. Their stories are buried beneath the concrete. Speaking of all the concrete that you walk on now, think about the things, the items, the communities maybe that are buried beneath your feet now. And you should watch Ancient Apocalypse. It's real. And now, after decades of silence, back to this story, those tunnels have been unearthed. It makes me, or maybe you, wonder how many stories are still waiting, which I love this stuff. And when they finally surface, what would you do? Like, if you were walking and you tripped and it was like Dead Man's Toe. Name that movie, Amanda, fellow mortal. Link in the bio. Nope, it's not a bio here. Well, it could be. Bio has it. Never mind, I'm not funny. Number 3, on some trending topics, let's talk about the science of nostalgia. And this freaks me out, why some memories stick forever. There's a reason that we get hit with waves of nostalgia out of nowhere. Scientists have discovered that our most powerful memories, especially these ones tied to our emotion, they're not just stored in our brains, but they're embedded in our senses: taste, touch, smell, sight, hearing. There's another one. There's a couple. That's why that's why a song can take you back to high school in an instant, or how this smell, it drops you into your childhood kitchen, and why certain places and faces and words, they feel like they belong to this other time, even if you had moved on. Because when you talk about the past, you're not just experiencing something mental, you're experiencing something physical. And sometimes, even if we think we've moved on, your body remembers. And that's freaky. Very freaky. So I always talk about, like, what you say becomes reality. I know that that's not entirely associated with that, but it is at the same time. Anyway, let's go to the random facts, because the random facts correlate with the trending topics. See what I do here? I work so hard on these obituaries. That's what's on my mind on these podcasts. It used to be this all over the place, bogus nonsense. It wasn't nonsense. It was, but it was where I was in the season that I was in, which I want to say, I meet you where you are. I think that's important. I think that perspective is a beautiful thing for you to have for others, and for me to have for others, you and self even. Be gentle with yourself. I mean, judgment is gross. Be great. Be grace-filled. Slow to judge, slow to anger, slow to form this opinion and be ugly to others. Anyway, I think it's important, because the season that I was in was just all over the place. And now here we are. I'm a little bit more organized, but that's great. The reason I said obituary earlier is because the first self-written obituary was a code. This is very interesting for your 3 rando facts, because in 2019, this woman in Canada, hi Canada, wrote her own obituary entirely in ciphered code. And it took her family over 6 months to finally decode her final message. Could you imagine leaving behind a puzzle, making sure the people that you love and loved you, or love you, quote unquote, really listened and really do love you? That's talking commitment. It's like, I really want to know what Daddy said. Hiccup said. Sound like a drunk in the pub. Ugh. And number 2, 3 random facts. Here we go. Ghost ships are still drifting in the ocean. No, thank you. There are actual ships, completely abandoned ships. No crew, no distress signals, that have been drifting across the ocean for years. And this is nuts, because no one knows where they've come from. They literally just appear. They're empty, and as if they never had a crew on them at all, which is nutso. Ghost ships. Jeremy, sir, would you do this? Would you hop on one and be like, let's go hunt this? Like ghost hunt? Jeremy's a fellow mortal as well. Obviously, as you can tell, if you're not a mortal, I like to give love and cred to. So shout out to all of our legacy and curator mortals. Christy, what's up, peoples? Your brain, number 3, fills in memories that never actually happened. This bothers me. Studies have shown that up to 40% of your strongest childhood memories might not even be real. Your brain fills in the gaps. It's kind of like AI technology. Well, there's more to that statement, but I won't go into it. I watched the show last night. It's fine. But this creates this false memories based on your emotions and stories that you've actually just heard. So the past that you actually hold on to, it might not actually be exactly how you remember it. And that bothers me because that makes me feel, and maybe you too, that we're lying, but we're not lying, because this is another mind-blowing thing is you're not lying if you don't know that you're lying, because lying means that you're intentionally altering the truth. So back to perspective. Let's do this full circle, baby. Since we're on our last, third, and final rando fact, like, that's why it's good to have perspective. Wow. Mic drop. I'm so smart. And those are your three random facts. And also, speaking of random facts, I'll add here's a bonus fact. You can go to ChatGPT, OpenAI right now. If you have that, if you don't at all know anything about it, I would encourage you to just get in there, Tiger, because there's a lot of really cool things that it can do. I forget all the time. It can help you with a paper that you're working on. It can help you come up with social media content ideas, or it can help you refine your way of thinking, or give you an alternate version of something. It can do a number of things, but it also can, in time, because if you're feeding it prompts like I am all the time, it can give you an IQ, which is pretty interesting. So I don't know if that's something that would make you a little nervous to find out about yourself. Tread lightly. Am I smart? You can ask basically what your IQ is, and it'll be able to give you a roundabout number. Pretty interesting. There's your bonus random fact. You're welcome. You're welcome. Is this thing on? You're welcome. This podcast, The Mortals, is, my gosh, I want to say 5 years old. Is it 5 years old? And it's been through a lot. It's seen a lot of changes. It's been through a number of versions of, variations of. We've had incredible guests on. We've had great stories, heartbreaking stories, heartfelt stories, honest, embarrassing for me, all over the place, unorganized, disorganized. Is disorganized the right word? It's the thing I keep coming back to. And you do too, obviously, because you're here. And I mean this, I've said it at the beginning, I say it now. Thank you. I appreciate you. I'd be honored if you were to leave a positive review on whatever platform you're listening to, follow the podcast, give it a high five and a butt slap, but only if it permits you to, which it permits you to. Okay, here we go. A ghost that wouldn't leave is our spooky, scary story time, which, here we go. The call that started it all. I didn't mean to rhyme there. It was a quiet morning at the funeral home when the call came in. The voice on the other end was frantic, and names are removed, by the way. The family was refusing to proceed with the burial of their loved one. He's not gone yet. At first, the funeral director assumed this was just another case of a family struggling to say their goodbye. It wasn't uncommon. It's not uncommon. Grief makes people hold on in ways that seem illogical to outsiders, because we see something and we can absolutely give another reason or how to fix it in 3 seconds. You know how that works, right? When you're in a moment of something, someone's just like, all you need to do is this, as the person who's eating popcorn and scratching their butt cheek. Some refuse to leave the gravesite itself, some the bedside, some called days after a burial, convinced their loved one is still alive. But this was something else. You don't understand, the woman insisted. He's still here. We hear him. He's in the house. He's trying to tell us something. The loved one is reposing at the funeral home. Funeral director sighed, rubbed their temples, and he had been in this profession for 2 decades, and he had heard about every request imaginable, but spirits not like this. This wasn't part of the job he's used to. Ma'am, I understand this is difficult, but I can assure you your father has passed away. You were here for visitation. If you need more time before the service, we can delay. But no, she interrupts. It's not just me. The whole family hears him. The house, it's different. Lights turning on by themselves, shadows moving. And last night, his bedroom door slammed shut on its own. He's not done here. She says all this on the phone. Funeral director has dealt with superstitious families before, but this one, he says, was different. There was fear in her voice, not just grief this time. Something in the director's gut told him this was no ordinary case. The funeral director agreed to delay the burial for 2 more days. The family needed time, and he didn't want to add to their distress or to his headache of having the burial, and then he's reading the room here. Could be a very bad thing after the burial. But that's when things got even more strange. First, the funeral director, the prep room lights began flickering, they said. Not a quick blink or a power surge kind of flicker, but the overhead fluorescence would dim completely and then slowly glow back to life. Now, when it's cold or hot, a fluorescent light can be affected with how it turns on. So they thought that maybe that could be explained. But then came the cold spots, and not just cool spots. You'd be standing in one part of the room, and then suddenly it felt like you walked into an open freezer door. Goosebumps immediately, the kind that don't go away when you rub your arms. And then there were the objects moving. Get me out of here. Away. It started small. There was a clipboard shifting a few inches on the table, a door that the funeral director knew they'd latched, swinging slightly open. But the moment that made his stomach drop, the funeral director's, the embalming tools. He had placed them in a row neatly like he always had, and when he turned back, one of them was on the floor. That is very spooky because as I'm recording this podcast in my studio that is very much soundproof, if you're watching this at Nathan Morris Music on YouTube, my face probably just got a little startled. I have a very nice studio. The studio is soundproof. Do you hear that? Anyway, I am a little shook. Soundproof. You don't really hear much anything out there. That scared me. Where were we? Cold spots. Rub your arms because you're so cold. Goosebumps. And then there were the objects moving. Whew. The embalming tools, he had placed them neatly in a row, like always. And when he turned back, one of them was on the floor. Now, these embalming instruments are very heavy. Picture a very nice weighted pen like the one I'm holding in my hand. It's something like stainless steel. It doesn't just blow because of air conditioning that might have caused the cold spots. Okay. The night that everything changed was this particular night because the funeral director was a skeptic. He didn't believe in ghosts, hauntings, spirits. He believed in science, and there are people that just believe in science. That's why people question sometimes God or faith in, because science, and that's theirs to believe. But the things that he could see and touch, facts, those were what his mind held on to, latched onto. But this night in particular, the night changed everything. Hiccup. It was after hours. The funeral home was completely empty. The funeral director was locking up. He walked through the prep room one last time, making sure everything was in its place. And that's when he heard it. A whisper. Not the pipes, the old ones that run through the ceiling, not the wind, a distant voice. And it was close. The funeral director freezes, every hair on his arms standing on end. His brain was scrambling to find this logical explanation. We've had those moments where you're frozen in fear or frozen in uncertainty, and you're unsure of something, but you can't seem to find why in your brain. But deep down, this funeral director knew something was different, and his gut was screaming, "You're not alone." Slowly, he turns around. The room was empty except the deceased man's casket, which had been fully closed. Oftentimes, it's what you do after a visitation and funeral. Even if you delay, then you close the casket, of course, and then you go ahead and get the casket ready for the transferring to the cemetery. The casket was closed, but slightly ajar now. Funeral director, his breath hitched, his pulse thundered, pounding in his ears. He stepped closer to the casket. His fingers are trembling as he lifts the lid a little more. Inside, everything was exactly as it should be. The suit, the peaceful expression. I mean, he had dressed and cosmetized and casketed the man, except for one thing. A single folded piece of paper. It had not been there before. The funeral director was sure of it. He did not place it in there. His hands were shaking. He picked it up and unfolded it. And in uneven, almost frantic handwriting, it said, "I'm not done yet." The funeral director did not sleep a wink that night. I probably won't either, by the way. By morning, he'd made a decision. He had to talk to this man's family. He needed to know if they had placed the note in the casket during the visitation. If there was any rational explanation possibly for what he had seen the night before. And when he met with the deceased man's daughter, she paled at the sight of the paper. She said, "Where did you find this?" she whispered. "Inside his casket." The funeral professional said carefully, "Did someone put it there before the viewing?" The man's daughter shakes her head slowly. "No, but I've seen this before." The daughter turned, reaches into her purse, and pulls out an old, crumpled letter. Now, the funeral director, her stomach flipped as he saw the exact same handwriting. She pulled out a note her father had written years ago when he had survived a near-fatal car accident. He had been in a coma for a few days, and when he wakes up, the first thing he told his family was, "I had to come back. I wasn't done yet." It had become this running joke in the family. Even whenever he overcame something, built something in the garage, he'd say, "I'm not done yet." But now, now he was lying dead in a casket, but somehow, some way, that message had found its way into his casket. 2 days later, the family agreed to proceed with the burial. Something at this point, though, had changed. The lights in the house stopped flickering. The strange cold spots disappeared in the house. At the funeral home, of course, as well. The doors, they stayed shut. The family felt this peace, finally, as if their father had finished whatever had kept him here. The funeral director, this lifelong skeptic, never spoke about what happened that night in the funeral home again. But when asked if he believed in ghosts now, he just smiles and says, "Some people aren't ready to go until they know their story is finished." Some people say ghosts are just memories that refuse to fade. I digress. I don't believe that, but others I know believe their souls with unfinished business. I think maybe some people aren't done yet, and or quite possibly are protecting someone or something. And when the time comes that they're finally done. I think they make sure we or someone knows. Would you want to leave a message behind? I would. What would yours say? Funeral home I started at, above the funeral home was obviously the residence and a doctor. It was very common for them to practice medicine in the 1800s in their residence. And Dr. Sturman builds this residence, practices, and was said to have a full skeleton that, of course, you've seen the movies where they're hanging in the corner. And one day he wakes up and in the ceiling, scratched in the wood, much like a pocket knife would do when you're carving your girlfriend or boyfriend's initials. My bones are here. A little spooky stuff, right? I like story time. I like these types of stories. I appreciate being sent these. If you have a spooky story and you want to send it, join the Mortals. Click the link in the description. Join now for free, all access. Mortal Me is the code to use, and join us. An incredible group of people. Help us continue to build this awesome community. Share your story, share your spooky one, and maybe, just maybe, it'll end up on an episode of The Mortals. This is 224. That's wild. I'm going to get a Snuggie and hold myself close. Thanks for being here. You're incredible. Thanks for supporting all the music and everything that it is that we create together. It means a lot. This is The Mortals, and I will see you at 225. Or I won't.